Okay, hello. Today we have a setup of the router to the ISP. This is the architecture which you have in case you have an office and you want to connect your office to the ISP internet. Now, here what we are going to do, I'm going to show you how they do the cabling and which interfaces you should connect. By the way, I'm using GNS3 on Linux, and then I'm going to use the CLI of the router. Mostly I'm going to use the command line for configurations on the PC and the router. The ISP, I assume that it is providing a DHCP service. So the IPs, I'll be picking them on the router interfaces dynamically. So I should set up the router interfaces as DHCP clients. And also one thing, I hope we all know what a router is. Router connects different networks. So from here, we are going to have two interfaces. One will be connected to the ISP and one will be connected to the PC. Now, how can we make sure that the main question is, how can we make sure that one network is bridged to another? The solution comes in the term which I've just used, which is a bridge. We are going to use a bridge. A bridge will connect those two ports. Those two ports on the router, and it will make sure that when one port tries to reach out to another port, they can connect with each other. As a result, if I connect, let me say PC 1 to port 2, port ether 2, and then if I connect ether 1 to the ISP, I bridge those two ports. I put them together so that they can act like the bridge can forward traffic between those two networks, between the ISP network and the customer LAN, which is connected directly to the PC. So let us start our router. And then you can also start the PC. We need to configure on GNS3, we need to configure the ISP such that when you're connecting your port, your router port to the ISP, you connect to an interface which is recognizable by your server. So here I see the wireless, I see the Ethernet, and I see another interface here. But for me, when I was installing GNS3, I make sure that the server is accessible through a virtual interface. So if you don't see that virtual interface here, you come in show special Ethernet interfaces and then add all. Now for me, this is the interface through which I can access the internet. Apply my changes. Now I come to my router, come and pick a cable here. I'm connecting port ether 1 to the ISP. Then I'm going to connect port ether 2 to the computer. Okay. Now let's jump into the console and start configuring. Login. The default logins are always admin, and then password is empty. I'll give you agreements. Here I'm like using a new router according to the setup, Mikrotik Router. Okay, so next step will be changing my password. That is when you have a new router. So now we are into the console. The first thing we are going to do, since I said that the ISP is providing a DHCP service, you don't need to put static IPs. I'm going to make sure that ETH1 is a DHCP client who is connected direct to the ISP router. So we configure that CAM IP DHCP client, add interface. We add the interface ETH1, then we make it disabled equals to no. Now we have added that, and from here it says it already exists from the connection. So what are we going to do next? We also have this the next thing I think we should do is we should add these two ports here. We should add the Ether1 port and 2 port into the same bridge, but we haven't created any bridge yet. So let us create a new bridge, interface, bridge, add name. Let us call our bridge 1. Now the next step is adding those 2 ports to that bridge. Interface, bridge, and port, add, specify the bridge to which you're adding the port, which you have already named as bridge 1. Then you give the name of the interface, Ether1. Let us do the same for Ether2. So when you try to see the interfaces, when you try to see your interfaces using interface print, you can see that there is Ether1 and Ether2 are running slaves. Running, that means they are connected physically. They are running slaves of bridge 1, as you see from here. But when you try to check the IP address, we only see that Ether1 is the only interface which is given an IP address. So how can we work on this? In order to make, since we have a DHCP, in order to make sure that Ether2 also gets an IP address, we are also going to make it a DHCP client. I think we can use this same. Now here it will be for Ether2. Oh yeah. Sorry. Oh, actually, when you're on bridge, it's like they are now the same. So we cannot give it a DHCP client. It is the PC which we should give the DHCP client. That is something which is very tricky. So that means our Ether2 is directly connected to the network of Ether1. I think we can try now pinging the Google DNS to see if we can reach it. Yeah, we can reach it. Next is, let's try configuring our PC. Actually, the PC is now is the one which should act as an PC is the one that should act like a DHCP client instead of Ether2. Command IP DHCP. then wait for it to go through the acknowledgement and all that, and see if it gets an IP. It has gotten an IP. So the next thing is try to check if our PC has connectivity to the internet. And that is it. So you have successfully set up your office. You can now start working. This is just basic SOHO setup when you have a router. I think that is it. Yeah. Let us first check this again. The office router. See the IP addresses. Yeah, so we have that one uplink IP address. Then ether 2 is acting like a downlink. Thank you. I think that is it.